Teaching Deaf and Hearing Impaired Students by Cecilia, Eliopoulos, and Emma Lane.
Little d deaf is someone who medically cannot hear, does not identify with the deaf community, and uses oral communication. Big D deaf is someone who also medically cannot hear, however, they take part in the deaf culture and communicate through sign language.
Those who identify with deaf culture often prefer to communicate through ASL, whereas other individuals choose to communicate through spoken English using the hearing world as the reference point.
Deaf students who communicate through ASL in a hearing classroom need inclusion. From their teachers, they need support and understanding. From their peers, they need social support and open-mindedness.
One of the easiest accommodations is to have an interpreter. Deaf students can also use writing or typing for communication, but depending on their age, this may not be an option. At some point, deaf students will have to rotate classes, leaving behind their typical supports and accommodations. In science class, the teacher may not sit the deaf student in the front or surround them with supportive peers. Not being able to participate in conversations puts the deaf students behind socially, leading to emotional instability and a negative effect on their mental health. They in turn could feel like a burden, unwanted, or a solitaire.
Both teachers and students can offer various types of support to help deaf students succeed in a classroom. Some of the supports are very simple and easy for teachers or students to implement, but others are more complicated and time-consuming.
The deaf student needs to sit in the front row with a clear view of the teacher, and if they have one, the interpreter. The teacher should be conscious of talking facing the class, not the whiteboard, because it will make it very difficult for the deaf student to follow along with the class. The teacher must also remember to talk directly to the deaf student and not speak through the interpreter. Speaking through the interpreter excludes the student almost entirely from the class and takes away from the student-teacher relationship. Having posters around the classroom that use both ASL and English will help both the deaf students and the hearing students learn the other language. The deaf student and their interpreter could lead the class once a week in an ASL lesson. They would teach their class basic ASL and maybe a phrase of the day. This will validate deaf culture in the hearing classroom while bridging the gap between the two groups of students.
The hearing students should also acknowledge, not ignore, their deaf peers. They should include deaf students in their conversations in and out of the classroom by talking and playing with them. Students should talk to their deaf peers directly, not through the interpreter. If they struggle with signing, writing notes is also an option. If they still don't feel like this is enough, students should be encouraged to seek help from their teachers or the interpreter.
Created using Powtoon.